this is meant to be an introductory of the Midcoast Economic Development Committee, of which you are members. And we thank you for agreeing to participate, and we hope that this will be a good experience. We are really, truly value you folks as a balanced set of business interests that we think need to be part of a regional discussion on economic development. There are three things we want to get out of today's meeting. First, we want you to understand what a CEDS is, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Second, we want you to understand a little bit about the different kinds of analyses that we are doing as an organization. And thirdly, we want you to have a sense of the process we are going to use in this analysis. And if you could bring up the first slide. My role in getting this going is to help you understand a little bit about who and what Midcoast Council of Governments is. I've had an opportunity to meet with a lot of you, but not everyone. So as we go into this, we will explain MCOG, we'll explain the role of MCEDC. MCEDC is what I'm calling the Midcoast Economic Development Committee. I find MCEDC bounces off my tongue pretty easily. And the roles within that and how we're going to achieve economic development strategies in our larger region. Midcoast government is a council of governments. It's statutorily driven. It consists of Brunswick and Harpswell, Saginaw County. All of the members in Saginaw County are members as a result of a county membership. For the Economic Development Council area, we also include the Lincoln County Planning Commission. Lincoln County has their own planning function and takes care of their communities within that county. Knox County, which also all the communities in Knox County are members as a result of a county membership. And then Waldo County communities. So essentially we run from Brunswick on up to Belfast. Our goal and focus is to strategically drive planning and regional planning in the region. We do a variety of planning projects across land use, sustainability, transportation, economic development, housing, and we provide a great deal of direct municipal assistance to the communities and provide support and grants, economic development. We also have a business assistance wing, and we provide loans and gap financing to a variety of organizations. The key piece that we see as an important role in the next 2 or 3 years is linking businesses and communities to key state and federal resources. The funding availability has never been greater, and our goal is to try to prepare communities and get them ready to handle that. About a year ago, MCOG went through a 5-year strategic planning process of its own. It established these 7 goals. The Hub of Excellence drives the MCEDC process. We hope that you take the opportunity to check our website and review the goals under the Hub of Excellence. The other supporting goals, however, are in the state and federal funding area, in housing, and in sustainability and resiliency, because we consider it all a link. We would also tell you that we think about organizing our information labor market areas, and we do that because we're also making a link between where our major employers are, housing, and our transportation network. I think there I'll stop and hand the transition over to Julie, who can help you begin to understand what a CEDS is. Julie, microphone.
Thank you. I was talking to myself. So as Matthew said, we're here today to kick off the process to develop the 5-year CEDS. So What is a CEDS, you might ask? In the chat, you'll see a link for an app called Slido. So if everyone could take a second and go to that link, there will be a question for you to answer. What is a CEDS? Is it a new kind of cough drop? COVID economic disease survey, a cooperative economic development or economic data service, or a comprehensive economic development strategy? What do you think?
Do we need to reset that link in the chat?
No, I reset it this morning. I think some people went in and because when I put the link in the chat, that's the first question that came up.
Okay. Okay.
Well, we've got some wise guys in the group who think it's a new kind of cough drop. Most of you are right on the money. It is a comprehensive economic development strategy. So what is that? Next slide, please. They come in two flavors. So there's a 5-year plan, and that's what we're all here to think about together. There are also annual updates to the 5-year plan, and in our case, MCOG takes care of the annual update. So the last 5-year strategy was developed in 2016. So as it turns out, it was a 7 or 8-year strategy, which means our new plan is both overdue and maybe ideal timing, because as we come out of the pandemic, there are some things that have changed in our region. So it really is a very good time for us to be thinking about what our shared economic strategy should be. In addition to being a council of governments, MCOG serves as an economic development district, and the USEDA, the Economic Development Administration, they support development of related economic development strategies for economic development districts. In this case, it's the CEDS that they're supporting. So at a general level, it's an opportunity for us to set goals and objectives as a region and to try to accomplish more together than we could individually. It's also an opportunity to showcase projects that need to get done in our communities. Key infrastructure projects, things that matter to the region, because when things turn up in a comprehensive economic development strategy as a priority project, it can help when applying for certain kinds of federal funding, especially funding grants that come from USEDA. Next slide, please. Now, the CEDS process requires an advisory committee, and we've done ours in 2 tiers. The first tier is a community advisory committee called a steering committee here. And Matthew and the MCOG team really tried to have this community advisory committee reflect the whole region, communities of different size, both county and municipal perspectives, folks from the south end, north end, middle of the region. Next slide, please. So the second tier in the advisory process, that's all of you. That's this advisory committee. And it's intended to reflect the wide range of industries in the region, as well as folks in the economic development community, different disciplines and perspectives, so that your eyes and ears on what's happening in the marketplace can help inform the process, and so we can make sure whatever MCOG comes up with for a strategy meets all of your needs. You know, we expect probably the the community steering committee will meet with McCog on a as-needed basis, probably once or twice a month, to help staff when they need a sounding board on day-to-day things. This advisory committee that you're all a part of, we're envisioning, maybe 4 to 5 meetings over the course of the next year, to provide input on work products and collaborative discussion to make sure we're reflecting your interests. Next slide, please. So at a high level, the planning process for developing the CEDS, it's going to start with a data dive. And Charlotte will talk to you in a little while about how that data is potentially going to be organized, what it might include. The idea is that the data will inform whatever we come up with for goals and objectives and actions for the region. The data will be hopefully both quantitative, what's picked up in the various data sets, and qualitative, what you all can share with us about what you're seeing that maybe isn't reflected in the data sets yet. So after the data dive, there'll be an exercise in setting goals and objectives,
It's me.
identifying our biggest challenges and opportunities for the region, and those projects and investments that communities need to make that'll help us to accomplish our goals. So that brings us again to what are we going to talk about today? So we're going to pick your brains a little bit about what you're seeing out there. And then we'll share our thinking about how the data might be organized for this project into story maps. We'll ask you whether that resonates with you and what trends you're seeing. We'll share a little more detail on timeline and next steps, and then we'll open it up for discussion. We expect this to be a year-long process with a 5-year CEDS ready to go for next October. Did I say 5-year process or 1-year process? 1-year process for the 5-year CEDS. So I'll turn it over to Sally Costello. Sally is co-chair of the Community Advisory Committee, the steering committee, and she'll share a possible structure for organizing the data and analysis to start.
Great. Thank you, Julie. And thank you so much, all of you, for taking time out of your busy schedules to come today. I think we've given you kind of a very high-level overview about the process for updating the CEDS. But what we didn't mention is that what we're trying to do is have a rewrite of the CEDS that really reflects the current economic situation in the Midcoast. And what we want from all of you is to help us get there and really help provide to make it more relevant and responsive to what's happening in our region. And all of you are out there day to day. We know that the data doesn't fully get to the story of that. So we want both the qualitative and quantitative information. The steering committee thinks it would be helpful to have an overarching theme around this current rewrite. And next slide, please. We've talked about possibly having economic resilience be the theme. And what I want to stress here is that it's not that what we want to stress here is weathering the storm. What we want to do is position our communities to be resilient and growing so that the economy stays strong over the long term. So we'd like to see if this resonates with all of you. This statement we'd like to rate, again, going into the chat, 1 being fully disagreeing and 10 being fully agreeing. But let me just read the statement. I know it's here up on the screen, but economic resilience for the Midcoast region depends on the sustainability of our businesses and workforce, communities, public infrastructure, and natural resources. And why I want to stress that is that this is how we will be approaching the data collection and analysis, and ultimately the goals and strategies. So let's see how we're doing here. Give everybody about 30 seconds to answer. Okay, data's coming in here. So it's looking right now about 20% in. People feeling that this may cover kind of the broad base information need to address.
3.
Okay, well, let's see. So I think I feel that this feedback is saying that maybe this is a good way to approach the data collection and the process. If there's anybody that has anything specific they think that we're leaving out of these sort of 3 general areas, please feel free to put that in the chat. Maybe we can talk about it a little later in the discussion. But let's move on. Next slide, please. Thank you. Resourcefulness was something that somebody put in the chat. So we're going to do another exercise together, if you'll indulge us, making a word cloud, but really talking about what are the 2 biggest issues facing the Midcoast economy and what are the 2 biggest opportunities for the Midcoast economy. You know, a lot of times we focus on the issues, but sometimes those issues create opportunities. For instance, we've got climate change, but is that an opportunity for green jobs and changing our workforce and becoming more resilient that way? So looking at the data might help us kind of address some of those issues. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's start with, what do you see the most 2 important issues facing the Midcoast economy? And again, if you can go to the chat, but what we'll see happening here on the screen is that the more people that answer this question, and when they have a similar response, those words will get bigger on the screen. And so that helps us just provide some feedback about what maybe the intensity is of some of those things that you all are seeing. So of course, housing costs, workforce, housing, all things that we know and are experiencing every day. Workforce getting bigger and bigger. Our data is going to tell us things like, yes, we're getting older, which an older population, which we know, but we also have people moving here. So maybe that's an influx to position ourselves down the road for some growth there. So these are the kinds of things that we'll be looking at in our data collection and having our team focus on at MCOG. Lack of sufficient, a lot of it around our workforce, a lot of it around housing. So entrepreneur opportunities, all of this is great information and feedback for our staff. So I think we'll move on to the next one. Okay, now let's talk about what are 2 opportunities for the Midcoast. Again, keeping in mind, there are issues, but there are things that we can do to make ourselves more resilient, more sustainable to address some of these issues. Again, another word cloud.
Yeah, I think our internet here is
Takes a minute. Immigration. Attracting new industries. Great. Perfect. We've got a lot of great, strong industries in food production and bioscience and green infrastructure. We've got a lot of exciting things that can happen. Nature-based tourism. We're talking about that here in Brunswick. Lots of great, benefits that to this area that are unique to this area. So we ought to focus on that. Seafood, innovation, great micro manufacturing. I know we've got some people on here who are incubating and working on those things. And do we need another kind of tech place here? So great. These are all wonderful and very relevant to what we need to be focusing on. So before I turn this over to, I think there might be one more slide, but before I turn this aquaculture, excellent. Before I turn this over to Charlotte Nutt, I just want to say that, again, we want to bring it back to these 3 areas, right? So the way that we're organizing this, because it's a lot of data, and we're going to do a very, very deep dive into that. So Charlotte's been working on right now just the housing story map, collecting the data, and then ultimately translating into a story map that will then analyze the data so that you can use this you know, in your everyday, you know, jobs and experiences. So the three things again that I just want to leave you with is that we're going to focus on community resiliency, business resiliency, and the third one is the public infrastructure and natural resources, which is also a very broad category, which could mean anything from positioning ourselves to get money for building new bridges, building roadways, to also infrastructure related to aquaculture, any number of things. And then again, positioning ourselves to be successful with using our natural resources. And this could also is not just related to money, but it's also related to policy. So those are things that I want you to keep in mind when you think about this overarching umbrella of economic resiliency. So with that, I will turn it over to Charlotte.
Thanks so much, Sally. So one of the first steps in the CEDS process is to gather data, present data, understand the data, sort of what is happening in our region in these three areas of, you know, business sustainability, demographic and housing sustainability, and public infrastructure and natural resource sustainability. So to gather this data, it's a mix of quantitative and qualitative analyses and data collection processes. MCOG staff, mostly all of us, I'm spearheading the story maps, where that focuses on the quantitative data. So the story maps, we had an example of a very cursory housing story map that was released last winter of housing, and it's an so maybe some of you have seen it, maybe not. That's it's on our website, and it's just an example of how we'll be presenting the data. It's a very interactive kind of presentation of the data, which I really like. I like those interactive presentation, or sort of that interactive displays of data, because everyone has their own, you know, messages and takeaways that they glean from the data. So I just wanted to give one example of our housing story map, a piece of our housing story map from last winter. It just looks at housing affordability. And so there were two slides, and you can, in the story map, you can slide between them, and without going into too much detail for the sake of time, but green is generally more affordable for homeowners. Red is generally less affordable. So we can see from 2016 to 2021, there's been a really stark, you know, decrease in overall housing affordability. And with all of this, we want to, you know, as Sally said, and Julia has said as well, relate our story maps to the you know, economic resilience mission. So our three story maps, you know, the first one of community sustainability, relating this to you know, our economic resilience, and really understanding the population and demographics in our region, as well as the housing. So with the population and demographics, who, you know, who is living here, who is moving here, who's moving away, and who's, you know, maybe who's enrolled in school or daycare, and who's not, and how does that relate to sort of the economic resilience of our area. And same with housing. In the word cloud that we just made, you know, people, that it's clear housing is an issue in our you know, communities in the Midcoast region. So looking at, you know, sort of the conditions of the units, how many units, are there enough? Are there enough in certain areas and not enough in others? Where do short-term rentals fit into the picture? Are they, you know, for some communities, they're an important part of people's incomes, yet perhaps they take away some of the housing opportunities, and where is that happening? You know, where are people building new units, and what is the market around it? And then of course, looking at affordability, like the map that we just saw, for both owner occupied houses and renter occupied houses. And hopefully all of this will come into, you know, an analysis of the housing gaps. Where do we need housing, and who for? And so that's our first one, and we're honing in on the last, you know, putting the last figures together for that one. So that's exciting. Our second one, business sustainability, thinking about economic resilience, definitely need business sustainability as a part of that. So what are the industries that are thriving? What are the industries that have potential and aren't reaching that? What are the, major players? What role do the smaller businesses have? Where are people commuting from and working? And then, where are people gaining the knowledge to work in our region? And also bringing it to the town level for, looking at growth and non-growth areas. Where is growth expected? Where are towns driving growth for both businesses, and housing? It's good to keep in mind these are all, all of these analyses and story maps stand separately, but they're really best when looked at together because they all play into each other. And our last one, measures of public infrastructure and natural resource sustainability. We're sort of looking at sort of the physical assets in our region. So, roadways and culverts and what are these transportation assets that we have, and where do we need to work on them more, and where are they, strong? And then the other really important, part of public infrastructure is centered around our working waterfronts. It's a big source of economic income for our region, and it's just one of the natural resource assets that fits together with the public infrastructure. And other natural resources, parks and conservation areas, lakes, all of these play a crucial role in, not only the economic resilience, but overall community resilience. And then unfortunately, the reality is that with these, with this asset, the ocean right near many of our communities, it can also interact with our communities on a physical level, and we do get hurricanes or storms and flooding, and which areas are vulnerable to sea level rise, storm surge, etc. So those are our three story maps that we're looking at. We wanted to just be a little more, continue with our interactive presentation. We're going to do, hopefully this is fun. This is a little quiz to test some, assumptions and sort of reveal some preliminary data. So we're going to go back to Slido and hopefully have some fun with some data questions. So just to test, kind of a mini test. We're thinking here, these questions are going to be about the population and demographics and some housing, just because that's the story map that I'm working on so far. So thinking about just the age of the Midcoast region, we saw that as a a concern in one of our word clouds. So true or false? The median age of Midcoast, Maine is 5 to 10 years older than the median age of Maine, the state of Maine, and then median age of the state of Maine is 5 to 10 years older than the median age of the United States. So we're going to go to the first one, comparing Midcoast, Maine to the greater state of Maine. People say true, people say false. I like this. This is really fun. Okay, it looks like we're leveling out. Most people think true, but some people maybe think it's a bit more, and some people maybe think it's a bit less. All right, we'll go to the next one. So comparing Maine to the United States. So similar, but a little more people think it's false. So we'll go to the chart. They were both true. So these are population pyramids. It's a chart of the number of people in each age categories. They're in 5-year increments. And then on the x-axis, it's the number of people. You don't really need to pay attention to the absolute number of people on the x-axis, but if you just kind of like blur your eyes a little and look at the shapes of the pyramids. So the upper one is Midcoast, and you see there's kind of a bulge from age 60 to 69. And that bulge sort of occurs in Maine from age 55 to 64. And then it doesn't really happen much in the greater US population. So it's pretty interesting to see how, Midcoast is quite a bit older than Maine, which is quite a bit older than the greater US population. And we've got, there's a lot to think about with this, and people may have, different thoughts based around this data, different ideas that come up because of different types of data. But some of the implications that I see are for workforce. All right, our population is aging. But I also wonder what opportunities could come out of this. Opportunities for part-time positions for retirees, or the healthcare economy, or even the care economy, as people may need in-home services. So there's there's a lot to think. There's a lot in these kind of simple data charts that we want to. I'm excited to hear everyone's take on these data sets. So another question. So this map is of the labor market areas, which LMAs, which in a nutshell is sort of where people live and work. They're different sizes. They're not based on the county. They're just sort of based on labor and commute patterns. Booth Bay Harbor is a lot smaller. Waldoboro is quite a bit bigger. So they're sort of all over the place here. But which of these, we're looking at population projections. So which of these labor market areas has the highest projected population growth from 2020 to 2030, and which has the lowest? And the population growth percentage is a percentage of the population in 2020. I hope that makes sense. So we're going to go to the poll. So which has the highest? Ooh, this is great. Brunswick. Okay, Brunswick's taking the lead. I'm going to give it like 15 more seconds. Right. Okay, so we have we're still, some people think Belfast. Okay, so Booth Bay, Harbor, and Rockland are sort of out, and most people think Brunswick, maybe Belfast, and perhaps Waldoboro. Okay, we're going to go to the lowest. We're more all over the place here. We're less certain about the lowest projected population change. All right, last call. Okay, so we're a little more spread out here. Here's a chart of the projected growth from 2020 to 2030. This data is from the Maine State Economist. Belfast LMA is projected to grow the most at 6.5%. Booth Bay Harbor is projected to shrink the most at 6.6%. Brunswick's actually fairly stable. I would have thought, similar to you all, that Brunswick would have grown more, but it's pretty interesting. And then Waldoboro and Rockland, Camden are at the kind of 2 to 3% range. And there's a lot here in terms of, when you think about migration, there are so many things that also come to mind, and it has so many implications for other parts of, kind of the data. And hopefully that's when we're digging in more with our other story maps. So this is one of the early figures, and hopefully we kind of, I guess I sort of think of some data as answering questions and some data as posing more questions. And this is one that I see as, posing more questions. Who's moving to the area? Who's moving to the Belfast labor market area? and who's moving out of Boothbay Harbor. And you'll have to follow up with the story. So what percentage of households in the Midcoast region are single occupancy and over the age of 65? 5, 10, 12, or 15%? This is great. We're really spread across the board here, but we're leaning towards the higher amounts, but we don't quite want to commit to 15%. It looks like. Okay, last call. Great. So in the overall Midcoast region, it is around 15%, mostly made up of females living alone, around 4% males living alone. You know, in Boothbay Harbor, that number is even higher, around 22, 23% of total households. And you know, I think there's a lot of implications for this data as people age in place. You know, it comes up in terms of transportation as people, you know, age out of being able to drive in their own cars. You know, not just, there's implications not just for the healthcare economy, but also the care economy as people come into, you know, into their homes to give them healthcare instead of them going to a hospital, et cetera, or a nursing home. And there's a chat comment, social connection too, absolutely. And that's what, again, what I like about this data. We can all kind of glean different things from it. I think this is one in particular that people can have a different relationship to this data, which is really the type of data that I like to produce. Okay, last one, but it's about short-term rentals, which I know is that's a topic a lot of people are interested in. So which mainland town has the greatest percentage of short-term rentals as a share of overall households? All of these towns are, you know, would be a lovely weekend or vacation stay in an Airbnb, but which one do we think has the greatest percentage? They were thinking Camden and Harpswell, or a little more split now. Boothbay Harbor is in there. This is great. We're really split. Okay, I'll give it a couple more seconds. Last calls. Okay, so we're all pretty split. I would also go vacation in St. George. I think St. George sounds great as well. I don't want anyone from St. George to feel left out. So looking at this map, the answer is Boothbay Harbor at 27%. This data is as of July 2023. And you know, that sort of corner of peninsulas, Southport, Georgetown are also quite high, 17-18%. There are some island communities, Idaho, MCEDC, that are higher than Boothbay Harbor. The data, when we get to really small towns, I am a little bit more skeptical of it, which I wish I could, you know, give the islands the same sort of data care that we give the other mainland communities. But really, that's where qualitative data steps in. So that's really how these two kind of interplay with each other, is when the quantitative data can't paint the whole picture, or the data may be you know, missing or inaccurate in certain ways. We just have to recognize that, accept that, and you know, go into the communities. So this map will be posted on the story map in conjunction with the map with a similar short-term rental map from December, showing the December rates, which is really interesting to compare those. So really looking forward to when that story map is up on our website and we can chat about it more. And with that, I wanted to pass it over to Julie and to you all to hear from you.
Thanks, Charlotte. Great overview. What's exciting to me about the story maps that Charlotte's thinking through is to be able to see information by community, in some cases by labor market area, to see it in the context of the region. Let's start with thinking about the quantitative data as she's laid it out. Are there any things that you want us to look at that she didn't touch on as something to be included in a story map? Is there anything we're missing? And I'll add that we're posting on the McCog website a more detailed data plan that you're welcome to have a look at after this meeting, and just let us know if there's anything on your wish list that hasn't already been captured. But just raise your hand if you think there's something on the quantitative side that we ought to be thinking about as Charlotte builds these maps. Anybody? Any thoughts? I'm not seeing any raised hands. Charlotte, that means you knocked it out of the park, I think. What about on the qualitative side? So what are you seeing on the ground that maybe the data sets don't reflect yet? You know, data sets aren't always current year or even the last couple of years. What are you seeing for trends in real life on the ground that you think we ought to be thinking about qualitatively? And I'll add here that McCog staff are planning to do a survey of the business community with help from a business consultant. What do you think we need to know qualitatively, or what are you seeing? Again, raise your hands and Max will call on you.
You can also type in the chat. I already see Amy Winston mentioning youth feeling like they matter and not feeling that way. Lots of new Mainers.
Everybody asleep? Come on.
Childcare.
Yeah, that's a good one. You know, we're finding in Rockland, you know, folks tell us that they want to get back into the workforce, but they can't find childcare.
Everyone seems to be latching on to that in the chat. Childcare is definitely up there. I see Monique with her hand up. Monique, do you want to give your thoughts?
I was just going to say the work from home. So the number of people that potentially live in Maine, but their occupations are in other communities and how that could impact things. I'm not sure what that fits though.
Are you thinking in terms of affordable housing or housing stock that isn't available for local workforce?
Probably both of those things. So along, you know, with the COVID migration, climate migration, and then people's ability to work from home being more common, you know, if people are living in a community, but they're making Colorado or California dollars because that's where their career is. How does that sort of change dynamics in the community? I don't think it's huge, but I do think it happens.
And in the chat, we're also just seeing something tied into that. You know, how many remote workers are actually in the region?
Yep.
We also, I do see Patricia's hand up. I just want to quickly go through these chat items as well. Seems like many people in Maine are more than likely working more than one job, or they have a main job and a side gig. So how can we quantify this side gig economy? Jay mentioned access to healthcare and mental health and substance use disorder care, community membership, and Nick's just confirming what Monique was saying. You know, how is remote work does impact communities, and how can we see more of that? Or how can we get the data on that? So I think we're caught up in the chat for now. I know it's going to keep flooding, but Patricia, I see your hand up if you want to give your thoughts.
Yeah, I thank you. And this is really interesting. I guess some of the questions that I have from our perspective here, transportation perspective, is understanding a little bit better where there are dense areas of employment centers and where people would go to work if they were going to do that. Again, mobility, I guess those are my questions more on the mobility piece, about connectivity, where the service centers are, and what the transportation patterns are. Because again, from our perspective, we'd be looking to provide access to people, to service centers, to employment centers, and to other regions. And I didn't really see anything here that would kind of help support or not what those initiatives. And so I think it's kind of inherent in some of this data, but it would be nice to see something a little bit more specific about the need for improved transportation and connectivity along this corridor.
Yeah, that's great, Patricia. Thank you. And I think it's some of what Charlotte envisions for the public infrastructure piece, but you're right, transportation will be an explicit look, and we'll be thinking about rail, bus, cars, bike, ped, the whole thing. And thank you for pointing that out. What about everybody else? Anything else come to mind that we should be thinking about?
I see Jen's hand is up as well. Jen, do you want to give your thoughts?
Hi, I just wanted to respond to what Patricia said, because I think in many ways we don't have the experience that people can use public transportation for work, for example. And yet I would imagine, I mean, there's one bus up and one bus down on Route 1 every day. But if there was an option to have public transportation, or whatever it was, to go to a job down to Bath, I think you'd see, for example, or Brunswick even, but I think you'd see that more people would find that feasible. It just is a different mindset. And that's one of the things that is going to change during these next years as all of this evolves.
Great. Thank you. Good points all. Anyone want to piggyback on that, or does anyone have a additional thought to add? What about from an island perspective, or?
I do see ferries being mentioned in the chat.
Yeah, I just jump in with the reminder that many people who live or work on islands do use public transportation on a regular basis to get to or from work or for their life. And I think that's an important part of the public transportation in this area. And that connectivity between ferries and other forms of public transportation is also something that has long been challenging.
Yeah, fair enough. And maybe there's a piece of that where both the public ferries and public access points where islanders can park their boats. Rockland provides, for example, a pier that islanders use for staging supplies or picking up and dropping off passengers. What are the broader needs when we think about transportation? What else comes to mind for folks? Are there particular industries where you see opportunities or changes or challenges where you think we ought to be digging into the data in a particular way? Are you seeing particular needs in your communities or industries?
I'd love to put something out there. I don't know how much of it is a data need or how much of it is broader awareness, but when we look at the potential changes coming to the lobster industry in 5 years due to changing right whale regulations, I think we're looking at a very significant economic disruption for coastal communities. And we have 5 years to plan for it. We have 5 years to make hay on a variety of fronts that potentially could help our communities weather some of these changes. I think having that be front and center in this plan, giving the role that the fishing industry plays in the Midcoast in this region is really important. And so I just say that I think that's a mix of data, and then also just sort of thinking like, what if we knew the state was going to lose, thousands of jobs in a particular industry in 5 years? That would be a major economic development crisis. DECD would be working on it day in and day out. And yet we have that potential here, but it's not as front and center in, I think, the collective mind. I know it's front and center for some people when you're living this in a daily life different from the rest of us, but encourage you to keep it front and center in this process.
Thanks, Nick. In addition to thinking about the importance of maybe the fishery in today's economy, what about some of the areas where lobster fishers might transition? There might be a nice link with data or opportunities related to aquaculture or ecotourism. Are there other things that come to mind for you that we should be thinking about gathering information on where we can?
Yeah, I think there's a variety of things. I don't know that it's realistic to think that every lobsterman is going to transition to aquaculture or ecotourism. Hopefully there will still be some fishery left that can support people and support communities. I know in Stonington, there's work with people who want to transition out of the fishery, who've said, I want to do something different. So connecting them to workforce development and online classes, making use of the good broadband infrastructure that we have. Then I think there's also just a set of, the communities have their comp plans updated, because if there is a major change in the fishery, and it's not certain that there will be one, but it's likely enough for these kind of planning processes, are comp plans updated? There's going to be federal money coming. Are people ready to take advantage of that? Have we thought about what we would do with that kind of investment? I think there's working waterfront infrastructure is particularly important. We know that's the economic connection between these communities and coastal economic activity, and that makes it, if we lose the working waterfront infrastructure, we lose that economic connectivity and that potential chance for doing something different or supporting broader changes.
Perfect, thank you.
So I see Jay's hand up.
Yeah, thanks. Along the same lines, I'm thinking about, well, back to what Nick was talking about with the potential 5 years from now. Certainly there's this cloud over the industry, the lobster industry, that is also affecting mental health. Parents afraid their kids can't go into an industry that's their culture and their life and their 10 generations. So I'm concerned about that. And I'm concerned about with changes in demographics, the COVID migration, what's happening to our waterfront, what's happening to access that is less and less. And I think there's a real regional opportunity here, because where I live is not the only place that has working waterfront, is losing access. So I think it's huge for the region. All that Nick talked about, all that Monique mentioned, and more, but the shift is happening, and the changes to, quantitatively, changes to culture, changes to quality of life, all of that. I don't know how you put that in data, Charlotte, but it's certainly top of mind for me.
Yeah, and I think that's where the qualitative and quantitative data go together. And I think those are all really really important, issues to explore. Yeah.
To Jay's point, one thing that was interesting when we did a heart and soul process in Rockland was how many people in the community identified with and valued the working waterfront who had no connection at all in their families to commercial fishing, very much part of the identity of the community and many communities in the region. So definitely something to think about qualitatively, if not quantitatively. Anybody else have thoughts to add? Okay, let's transition
sorry.
then
So
back
we do
to
have one.
Matthew, who will wrap up with a little more detailed look at what the process is going to include between now and next October, what you can expect from us, and maybe collect your thoughts on how today worked and what we might do going forward.
Thank you, Julie. Sally, you definitely have something.
Matt, you're back. Good. Okay. Now, I just wanted to kind of ground this back to the data piece and how the data doesn't tell the full story. And the reason I say this is because, like, for instance, while we track STRs and we know where those are, and so we talk about, Charlotte made a comment, those are good places to vacation. But what is that doing to our housing, right? And does there need to be some policy, local policies around that, limiting those because it's taking, inventory off the market so that, it's displacing people. I mean, we're going to be diving really deep into this data. When we looked at the population growth, I was looking at that just, even though I've seen it numerous times now, hit me in a way when Charlotte was talking about it, that those numbers are less because of the overall population. That doesn't necessarily mean that those total numbers won't be higher than those others. So I think we need to be careful when we're making when we're going through kind of the analysis and the goals and strategies about really kind of understanding that data. That's why that qualitative piece is so important, and your input, so that when we hopefully have our next meeting in person, those things come out and really help inform it. Another example, I was seeing Kevin Bunker on here, thinking about all the affordable housing and the great work that Developers Collaborative does, and how when we talk about people living alone, and how we might really need to step up our game, not only with the social services, but also with housing that caters to persons that are aging. And so I think, and how does that then translate into money that we're going after collectively? Because we saw with that those maps from Charlotte that that we are older than other areas of Maine and also the United States. So I think I just wanted to just kind of put that in there about that the data is really going to go much further than just what the quantitative piece is, and that all of this input that we're hearing today, we got so many great links from Amy Winston about things that we really do need to look into. We as a steering committee and a board, an MCOG board, are really going to make sure that all of those things are kind of covered as much as possible in the CEDS process. So, and including policy changes. So we can't forget about that. So I just wanted to make that quick comment.
Great, thank you, Sally. And team, be aware that I might pop out of here. My stability is really poor today, so jump in to finish up if I can't. So we have a fairly intense work plan that includes, to your chat comment, Amy, both qualitative analysis and a formal review interview process with employers around the region, being helped by a number of others. And it also includes a great deal of data inventory. To Patricia's point, we have streetlight data, and we will be doing a lot of origin and destination examination. Our organization and data is also collected by labor market area. So we're making assumptions on what the labor market hubs are. And all of that work we intend to get done between December and January. We're looking forward to a first meeting with the committee in January to begin presenting some of our initial community sustainability story maps, and then continue that data work and coming back to the advisory committee meeting for story maps on business and public infrastructure, natural resources sustainability, and in that capturing movement of people to where they live and to where they work. And Charlotte, if you can give me the next slide. What we want to move towards is working with the advisory committee and establishing a set of goals and objectives and actions in April and June, and then beginning to review a draft plan of the CEDS with the steering committee, sending that draft plan out to the advisory committee to get input, and then bringing it back to the advisory committee for formal examination of it in September and October of next year. During this period, we will also be reaching out to you to conduct somewhat the same employer survey. I believe that we can apply that same employer survey that we intend to do, a qualitative assessment, to each of you, and we'll begin to work that information into our process. So we have availed ourselves in this data process to University of Southern Maine database, some databases which Charlotte has helped us as an organization purchase, and then of course all the ACS and census data. So we believe that we'll be able to really paint a really good quantitative and qualitative picture to develop these goals and objectives and actions, and really help communities steer towards the investment infrastructure and infrastructure into critical cluster industries that we think need to be done. That, you know, the discussion about working waterfronts, how do we reinvest in those working waterfronts, small and large, to ensure that a transitioning industry survives. Those are the kind of things we hope to develop during this process. And I think if you would bring up the last slide, one of the questions we want to really get through and real quickly is understanding the best way to share information with you. You know, is it website? Is it emails? Is it email blasts? I know our board of directors and our general assembly gets information in a couple different ways. If you could just share with us what's the best way to do that. And also, you know, we also have had a fairly strong discussion here. Zoom meetings, live meetings. We think that there's an important part of this that needs to be a series of live meetings where we really can engage with you. Thanks. I'll give you a couple minutes to answer those questions. And I hear Zoom pretty strong, which means that we'll have to work a little bit on our Zoom process here. We usually do not have a problem, but I have a problem today. I'm not sure whether it's internal or not. Great. I think we can achieve a lot of those connections with you as we go forward. Thanks, Charlotte. So Julie really got us into a discussion. We have about 5-10 minutes. What we're really interested in is any further reactions that you have to what you heard today. Where's the next meeting? We want to know whether you want to do live. We really would like to do the next meeting live with you so we can introduce everybody to one another. We guarantee providing food. So whether it's a morning or it's a midday or it's an afternoon, we'll want to hear from you about what's the best time to do that. And what can you expect from us? You know, I think we've described the data work that we're going to do. We're going to describe the reaching out to employers. I will tell you that a sister project to this with funding that we receive is also looking at the housing issue in our 3 sub-regions, the Bath Brunswick, Saginaw area, the Knox County area, and Waldo County. So that will be going on at the same time that this project, and we will integrate a lot of that information. So what are your reactions? What are your reactions to what you heard today? And how do we, are you finding the way we've projected to move forward acceptable? And sorry, I'm not using my camera, but when I do, I turn off. So. Patricia.
I think this has been great and very helpful, and I do support your approach. I think you have a very thoughtful and comprehensive approach to moving this forward. I think, and I also agree that, you know, having in-person touch points tends to make these types of initiatives a little bit more interactive and, you know, gets people going. The one just question, I think this was great today as an introduction, but you know, getting the information and the data and the slides ahead of time is helpful, because then we can look at information and digest it and process it, because, you know, we all turn on our screens and our head was someplace else and we're looking at it, and at least for me, it takes a little bit. So I think a little advanced data of the presentations, just so we can prepare, I think would be helpful.
Thank you. I agree. I think the more information we can get out to you and share before meetings will be very helpful. Other comments, other questions?
I'd be happy to jump in and say I think the data presented was really stark and interesting, and not exactly what I would have thought for the Midcoast, despite living in this world and doing some of this work. I think there's a lot in there about how that data gets shared and translated and help people understand what does this mean for communities. I would offer the Island Institute in Rockland, always happy to host this group there on our 4th floor conference room. And I'd love to, if we are doing in-person meetings, I'd love to move around a little bit and see or be proximate to different parts of this region. I know the issues in Brunswick are different from the ones in Rockland, and so showing up in some of these different regions I think would be nice.
Thanks, Nick. We had that conversation. We were wondering if we'd hear that, and we agree. We completely agree. And your 4th floor office is a nice place to have a meeting, so we'll keep that in mind. Other comments? Mandy, we also talked about your workspace and whether we could do a meeting there as well in Bath.
I think depending on timing, you know, we could definitely talk about that. Our conference room is not suitably sized, but the open space, again, you know, in the afternoon, I know that we've talked about morning meetings. Mornings are a little tough for us because we are a workspace. So.
We'll keep that in mind. We'll keep that in mind. I haven't heard. I haven't heard anybody really speak to the time. I think what we'll do is follow up with a survey of all of you to get a better sense of what are the best times to meet, and live or Zoom, and then begin to schedule out a meeting. We'll bring that material back to our steering committee and really kind of talk that through and develop a little bit of a firmer schedule as we begin to nail down the parts of this process. Julie or Sally, any comments?
No, I really appreciate everybody taking the time today, especially as we get into the story maps. I think Patricia's point is a really good one. People take in data very differently. So as we have the whole story map to contemplate, and we want to stimulate a discussion around what does it mean to each of us? What are we seeing? What are the goals and objectives? Yeah, we'll try to get that to you in advance so we all have a chance to think about it and hopefully have a a really full conversation. I love the points made about at least some meetings ideally would be in person. Get to know each other a bit and maybe feed off each other's energy. Really glad you're all willing to take the time with us, because the project will only be as successful as everybody's participation. You'll all see things we won't, and we appreciate it.
And I will just say, I think Julie about covered it, but I do want to thank all of you for coming. I don't know if you took a chance to really see that list and the wide spectrum of people that are involved. And bringing that qualitative information is just critical, because as I said before about the quantitative, we just can't have the full story unless we have people on the ground who are actually experiencing all that we need to fold into, our 5-year plan. So thank you.
Great job, Charlotte. Thank you so much for the data, and thank you for the work you're doing between now and the next meeting.
Yeah, no, and thank you all. Matt, it looks like Jen has their hand up.
Yep.
Okay.
Jen has a comment, if we could get to her before we close out.
Process and what we're facing is both stark but hopeful, and we're identifying obstacles in a manner, a really deep manner, and by identifying the obstacles and challenges that we expect to experience in the near future, and by identifying sources of federal money and other monies that we might be eligible for, we're then identifying the opportunities that we might be able to take advantage of. And to me, this process is a very hopeful and exciting process in that way. It's very hard sometimes to be faced with so many challenges at the very same moment, but it seems like it will be a very important process this time, especially. I've been involved in CEDS processes before, and somehow this period in our lives is just such an important time, and I think the more people we can engage in our communities through however means, not necessarily in the direct process of CEDS, but just in our thoughts and how we bring things together. I appreciated a lot of what Amy was bringing in. I know Amy for years, so I know her very good background in qualitative research, and culture, and the changes that are on us at this time, and how it will change our culture going forward. I mean, this is all got to be pulled into the whole picture, and I think we have a really good group of people to start that process.
Thank you, Jen. I too share your concerns. I kind of think, being a longtime member of the Midcoast and living here, that we're kind of into this very interesting quintessential change that I haven't seen in 45 years of planning and living in this area. So I think we have our work cut out for us. I want to thank you all very much. We will follow up with notes of this meeting. You'll begin to see an organized page on our website that'll begin to capture this material. There are a number of folks who couldn't make it today that have reached out, that were traveling at conferences. So we'll share a lot of this information with them, let them watch the production, and we will be back in touch, and we will keep you informed of our activity. Thanks very much, everybody. So long.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks all.